Hello, my name is Emma, and I talk about craft-related drama on this channel. Today, we are going to talk about the knitting website Ravelry.com. This was a very highly requested topic, a retrospective of some of Ravelry's most controversial moments, some of which went surprisingly mainstream.
The online knitting community, Ravelry. We got some Ravel heads here tonight.
So I had originally intended to cover Ravelry's entire history in this video, but at a certain point I made the executive decision that for my own sanity, I would split this into two parts. So in part one, which is today's video, I'm going to start with an overview of Ravelry's history and the first 10 or so years of the site. And just to keep you on the edge of your seat and actively listening, I'm going to include a little quiz at the end of this video and at the end of next video. So just pay attention, but no pressure. This is not school. I'm also warning you now that I will be falling down a fair number of rabbit holes, so if you would rather watch a shorter and more condensed version of this story, then I'm sorry, but that's not gonna happen. Fun fact, the Google Doc that has all of my notes for this video on it is called A Brief History of Ravelry, because for some reason I thought that this would be a quick little story to put together, but it wasn't, and I just kept finding more things that I had to include. As always, discuss your thoughts below, but don't send hate to anyone mentioned here by going to their pages. I know none of you would do that because you're all really cool and good people, right? Okay, good, great, thank you. Moving on. So I know I said this video is about Ravelry's controversies, but before we look into any of them, I want to go through and give you a little bit of context on what the website is and a little bit about its history. I think all of this is crucial to understanding the scale of the website and the impact of the controversies. So, what is Ravelry? Ravelry, at its essence, is a site where people who do fiber crafts can gather. It's a place for finding resources, community, and inspiration. This is from their About section on their website. Ravelry is an inclusive, friendly website for knitters, crocheters, spinners, weavers, and dyers. We are made up of millions of yarn lovers from all over the world. Ravelry provides a personal notebook for fiber artists to keep track of their projects, yarns, and fibers, tools, and a pattern library, a rich database of patterns and yarns, and a community with thousands of forums and groups to connect with other Ravelers over any interest you could think of. That sentence was so hard to read. But basically, there are three main branches of the site: the database, your notebook, and our community. The database has nearly 500,000 knitting and crochet patterns with advanced search filters to make it easy for people to find the projects that they are interested in. For those unfamiliar with knitting and crochet terminology, a pattern is essentially a step-by-step guide of how to make a piece. Think like a recipe. Patterns are usually sold as PDFs and contain materials lists, yarn information, sizing, and sometimes even step-by-step photos of techniques. Ravelry collects all of these patterns in their one convenient database that allows users to search for the project they want to make. We'll get more into this later, but for now, that's all you have to know. The Your Notebook section allows users to keep track of projects, their yarn stash, tools, and pattern library. These features are public and can be used as a way to connect with other crafters on the site as well. This basically works exactly how you would expect a digital journal to work. Then the community section is something that you will be familiar with if you saw my Mystical Creations yarn video. The Ravelry website calls this section your new virtual fiber circle with over 9 million yarn-loving friends. And there are many groups spanning a wide variety of yarn and non-yarn related topics. So despite its controversial history and complaints surrounding the site, which we'll get into in both of these videos, Ravelry still maintains massive popularity due to the fact that it has no major competitors at the same scale. No one is doing it quite like Ravelry. If you couldn't tell from just listening to me talk and how these videos are structured, I always have a lot going on in my mind. It can be hard to streamline and organize my thoughts. That's why I've been using the sponsor of this video, Milanote, a tool for organizing all of your creative projects in one convenient digital location. So I've actually been using Milanote to collect sources and research for this video and to organize and brainstorm a very specific celebrity stylist request for this crochet pigeon vest. It was really helpful to be able to quickly put together a mood board to pin down a vibe and keep all of my style and fit references in one place. Milanote also gives me the ability to send this mood board or any mock-ups to clients directly for their approval. And it's really easy for me to make edits for them to see in real time so that I don't have to keep sending PDFs back and forth for really small changes. So because this project was so pigeon-centric, the first thing I did when putting together these boards was just to add a bunch of pictures of pigeons. I like how Milanote has a drag and drop feature because it really gives me creative flexibility on exactly how my boards turn out. I also have this task task list to keep me on track, which obviously helps when I'm on a really tight deadline, but it also helps when I have a lot of projects going on at once and I want to keep track of all of the things that I have to do in one place. For the Pigeon Vest project, I put together this yarn inspiration list, which is basically just another mood board, but for yarn specifically. Milano also has a color reference tool that works really well for any kind of visual projects that you might be working on. It was especially helpful for me here in pulling shades out of the iridescent neck feathers of the pigeon, so I could figure out how to translate that into yarn. Spending a few minutes deciding on like the yarn textures and the shades that I wanted made it much easier to then go to the yarn store and find what I wanted because I already knew exactly what I had in mind. Like I literally brought these color swatches to the yarn store employee and I asked them to help me find a good color match for this shade of teal, which they totally nailed because I was able to show them the exact shade that I wanted. And the best part about Milanote is that it's free forever with no time limit. I've seriously been loving using it and I think you will too. So if you've been looking for a way to keep track of your creative projects and inspiration sources, then make sure to check out Milanote using the link in my description. That's all. Thank you Milanote for sponsoring this video and let's get back into it. So over the years, Ravelry has grown to a massive user base. The site launched in 2007 and by the end of the year, they had already reached 57,000 users. By 2009, they hit 430,000 and by November 2010, they hit 1 million users. The site continued to grow, hitting 2 million in 2012, 4 million in 2014, and by 2017, Ravelry had reached 7 million users. The website seems to be following this pattern of growing by approximately 2 million users every 2 or 3 years, because in 2020 they hit 8 million, and by 2023 they currently have 9 million users. I don't know how many more people that knit are on the planet to possibly join this website, but basically if you knit, you have probably heard of Ravelry. Before we go any further, I do want to make a correction from my MCY video. As I've mentioned a few times, I was actually not very familiar with Ravelry before starting to do research for these videos. In passing, I mentioned someone whose name came up a few times on the MCY Ravelry boards around 2008. This person is Cassidy, one of the founders of Ravelry, but I refer to her by her dead name. Her name came up in the thread because at the time, every new user on Ravelry had to go through an approval process where Cassidy or someone from the team sent them an invite. If I had looked into this at all to see who this was, then I would have obviously seen this and not used her old name. Since it was a somewhat tangential detail in a very detail-packed story, I did miss it, and that is completely on me. But thank you to all the people in the comments who clarified this for me. I would never dead name someone on purpose, and Cassidy will be a big part of today's story, so I thought I would just get all of that out of the way right at the beginning so we're all on the same page and so that you can see how the thread connects from my previous video. And since I'll be referencing some older articles in this video, regardless of what these sources say, I'll be using Cassidy and she/her pronouns to refer to her. And on a less serious note, I mispronounced this pattern's name. It's the clapetee, French pronunciation apparently. Keep your eyes peeled for a surprise clapetee appearance in this video. So now that we know a little bit about what Ravelry's function is today, let's talk about the beginning. Where did it come from, who made it, and why? So back in 2005, a Boston-based knitter named Jessica started a knitting blog called Freckle Girl. The blog had posts relating to knitting, but it also really reads like a personal journal at times, with posts ranging from yarn that Jessica ordered, project updates, family vacation photos, pictures of her brand new Nokia phone, very 2005 of her, and in-depth posts about her IUD, birth control, and pregnancy scare. Now, I am not 100% sure how this compared to other knitting blogs at the time, but her posts had a decent amount of engagement. Most of her posts had at least 4 comments on them, and some of them had up to 22. I know some popular bloggers at the time had thousands of followers, so Jessica wasn't a huge blog, but I just want to point out that people were reading it and they were responding to it. Feel free to weigh in on this and give me more context if you followed knitting bloggers at the time. I know some of the big ones probably had hundreds of comments. Some of this information is a little hard to find without knowing where to look, and unfortunately in 2005, I was 7 years old and more concerned with memorizing my multiplication tables, trying to learn how to do a round-off back handspring, which I never really did, and playing elaborate make-believe games with my friends at recess to stay up to date with the popular knitting blogs of the day. In an interview on the Fruity Knitting podcast, Jessica said that while she enjoyed her blog and connecting with people on there, it was frustrating that there was no central place to pool the information from all the blogs that she followed. She wanted to be able to see what people were working on, see what kinds of modifications people made to patterns, and have a place to store all of the patterns that she bought. So basically, Ravelry started as a way to combine everyone's knitting blogs. Okay, quick side note, the interview with Jessica and Cassidy on the Fruity Knitting podcast is on episode 54 of the podcast that released on May 22nd, 2018. Fruity Knitting, which started as a husband and wife duo, has been around since 2016, and in episode 135, they interviewed Charlotte Stone to talk about her new book, Charming Colorwork Socks, which I actually have a copy of. I was gifted this by Charlotte, and I'm halfway through making a pair of socks. I kind of just stumbled upon this podcast while searching around for my Ravelry research, but I went through a whole roller coaster of emotions when I found out that Andrea's husband passed away in 2021. She had taught him how to knit on the podcast, and he would be on there to talk about their projects. After interacting with one video and finding out that he had passed away, I saw this really beautiful eulogy video that Andrea and her daughter made for him, and it made me tear up. I know this isn't like really related to the story, but in the midst of all of the drama and hatred and negativity on the internet, it's rare to find someone who so genuinely and openly shares about intimate loss in a way that isn't trying to farm engagement or make money. Their YouTube isn't monetized, so the only way they make money is through their Patreon. And there's one thing she said in that episode that will stick in my mind for a long time. There's nothing on this earth that I love that's not intimately connected to him. She has continued the podcast with her daughter, and they focus on interviewing, sharing, and uplifting designers. Based on the few episodes I've seen, I think she's a great interviewer that does her research to ask really interesting questions to her guests. If you're plugged into the knitting community, I'm sure you've already heard about her. I just live under a rock. But if you somehow haven't and you like long videos and about knitting, then I do recommend her podcast. Okay, thank you for listening. Back to the story. So on April 12th, 2005, Jessica posted on her blog about how her partner, Cassidy, had an idea for a website. After she had written this little intro, she said she would let Cassidy write the rest of the post. For a little background, Cassidy is a coder. In a 2009 interview with Tim Bray, a Canadian software developer, environmentalist, and political activist, Cassidy says that she went to the University of New Hampshire and studied computer science. This is where she met Jessica as well. Cassidy graduated in 2000 and started with Microsoft stuff, moved to Java, and then moved to Ruby. This is her coding background, and to be honest, I don't really know much about like what this means to other coders, but I'm sure it means something to someone, so I wanted to include it. So most importantly, here is Cassidy's idea that she posted on Jessica's blog. The idea is to create an encyclopedia of cool patterns, and yarn too, and mix in blogging and other social aspects. I think that it would be nice if knitters had a place where they could share their completed creations, get help for works in progress, and get ideas for future projects. She then goes on to list some of the potential features for this website: the patterns, community aspect of patterns, sharing and bookmarking, yarn. This post was met with excitement from commenters. Wow, where do we sign up? You'd better contact a patent attorney ASAP. Seriously, great idea. I'm not a knitter, but I think this is a fantastic idea. And about 6 months later, in October 2005, someone commented, I was just thinking about this site today and wondered if anything ever came of your cool idea. So they'd gotten people a little bit fired up about this idea, and it did take some time between when they made that post and when the idea came to fruition. When Cassidy and Jessica began working on this, they said they had no plans for this to turn into a business. Their original goal was to have 1,000 users on the site. On May 17th, 2007, Jessica updated her blog again. So at this point, they had launched the site, and it was in beta. In this beta stage, the site had less than 100 users. Jessica says that they got this idea to use the term beta from Gmail, who had also been doing an invite-only beta program when they first launched. And they basically did this to save space on the servers that they had. In this post, she says, just 2 weeks ago, I put a post up on the Ravelry blog letting our beta testers, at the time a little under 100 people, know that it was okay to talk about the site on their blogs. We needed a few more testers and thought we would get maybe 1,000 people who would be willing to put up with some bugs to get a head start. Well, we were wrong. Earlier tonight, the invite request list has exceeded 4,500 people. Cassidy and I are so thrilled that our little website idea has resonated with so many knitters and crocheters out there. It is such a great feeling to know that all our hard work for the past few months has been worthwhile, that Ravelers are having fun organizing, playing, and meeting new people. It is like a dream come true. We have had to pinch ourselves more than once during the past couple weeks. I have heard some things through the blog grapevine that people are unhappy though. I know that we should have just taken the invite request list down at some point, but this is our first time doing this, and we just got caught up with the excitement of it all. We are not a large corporate entity with a business plan. We are a guy and a girl who had an idea and are pulling it off the best we can. So I would just like to ask for a smidge more of everyone's patience. I know that everyone is anxious to get into Ravelry and get started. We want you all in just as badly. We are aiming to have the whole waiting list into Ravelry within the next month. Cassidy is making improvements to the site so that it can handle that many users, and we are working out a way that we can make some money to help with the costs of running a much larger website. Thank you all, really. And then she added an edit to this. If you would like to be super prepared for when your Ravelry invite arrives, you could get all of your knitting/crochet projects and stash into Flickr. This will make it much easier for you to get started at Ravelry. Most of the getting started period for me was just getting everything I wanted into Flickr, finding the pattern and yarn info, etc. Just an idea. So then at this point, someone, either Jessica or Cassidy, posts on the Ravelry blog, giving people the go-ahead to start telling other people about Ravelry. As always, want to say a warm welcome to all new Ravelers. So happy to have you here. Hope the site is fun so far, smiley face. I know I have really enjoyed seeing all the new people, yarns, and projects. So what's up? Well, lots actually. 1. Cassidy has put together a new discuss section, a kind of forum. It's going to be linked into the pattern and yarn pages so that everything on the site flows together and info is easy to find. Post a new topic. Respond to the ones that are already up there. I'm already having fun with it myself. Great idea, Kelly Sue. 2. We are finally ready to come out of the closet. Sorta. Cassidy made a new login page the other day so that people coming by can get an idea what the site is all about, and new folks can also sign up for an invite. So you can write about Ravelry on your blog if you want. Yay! My heart is beating all fast just thinking about it. Haha, it would be super helpful if you told people what you like about it, and you can link people back to our main page. As I said, we have a button there where friends can sign in for an invite. The only reason we're doing it this way is so we can grow a bit gradually, so that Cassidy and I won't lose our minds over here. Everyone is welcome though. We will also be assigning all you beta testers some more invites, so keep an eye on here when that is ready. I will do another quick post or an email. In pure blogger style, here are 3 quick badges that Cassidy threw together to put on your sidebar. We will have other badges soon and more blog integration once we are all open to the public. Will be within the next couple weeks. We are thinking probably something like little pictures of your projects, etc. So also on the podcast, Jessica mentions going to Maryland in May of 2007 to hand out buttons. And the reason I'm being vague about this is because everybody in this podcast conversation seemed to understand what this means, even though I didn't immediately. And actually, when I went back, I realized that they referenced it. But at the time, I was like, why does everyone know what Maryland is? And I have no idea what they're talking about. So Jessica said, in May, I made up little buttons and went to Maryland, and we all hung out on the hill there. And she gave out the buttons and told people to go to Ravelry.com. After I rewatched the podcast and then also Googled around a little bit, I discovered that this was in reference to the annual Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival that took place in early May 2007. This is one of the largest festivals of its kind, and it just recently celebrated its 50-year anniversary. Unsurprisingly, this festival features a lot of sheep and wool. As I was looking around to see what the event was like, I found this great vlog from Let's Knit Together, another husband-wife duo podcast, and they vlogged the 2007 Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. There are auctions of spinning and weaving gear, as well as a sheep-to-shawl contest, where contestants have to shear the sheep, spin the yarn, and weave the fabric for a shawl in 3 hours. So Kat, the host of Let's Knit Together, would go to these events and do vlog-style videos at all the knitting events, where she would go and do interviews and just kind of get the whole general vibe of the event, which I thought was really cool. And the clapetee was mentioned 2 times in this vlog.
It's a clapetee. There's another one.
I think it's so cool to see what people on the internet have documented, and Kat's outfit is just so cute in this video. A little more about Let's Knit Together. On their website, they say, shot entirely in high definition, Let's Knit Together rivals PBS and the Discovery Channel for superior production values and enjoyable content. And I do have to say, their audio is pretty crisp. Like, whatever mic they're using is clearly working better than like most of the TikTok street interviews that I see these days, so good job, Let's Knit Together.
I'm gonna knit a pot holder for Mother's Day, but if I don't finish, I'm going to make it for Father's Day.
Because damn it, that's how long it's gonna take.
So that was a big moment for Ravelry in 2007, where they went and did a lot of like word of mouth marketing to the people at this event. And just to give you an idea of the scope of Ravelry and how quickly it grew, by 2009, Kat from Let's Knit Together is documenting a huge Ravelry meetup. This is a part of a video whose title made me burst out laughing when I saw it, called Bob and the Big Sock. So when I first clicked on this video, I thought that it would be too much of a tangent to include in the story, but Bob, the titular character of that video, is Ravelry's mascot based on the Boston Terrier that Jessica and Cassidy owned. Now, I don't think the person wearing the knitted Bob costume was the official mascot. I think the dog was. I couldn't find out much about them. But the actual dog who was the mascot, Bob, did unfortunately pass away in 2017. And just so I don't leave you hanging on the second part of the title of that video, the big sock in question has no relation to Bob or to Ravelry. The Big Sock project began in October 2006 by Joanna Ratcliffe. This started as a charity knitting event and was an attempt to break the world record for biggest sock, which was previously held by the Sheep Farmers Association of Austria at 16 feet. This big sock made the rounds from Europe to Sock Summit, and then to Maryland Sheep and Wool, where it appeared in this vlog with Bob. I can't find any information on whether this sock was finished, but the current record for the longest hand-knit sock is 18 feet 8 inches, and this was knit by Ashawn Fernando, aka the Sock King, in Berkeley, Massachusetts. This longest sock project was either finished or recorded on March 29th, 2021. And Fernando is probably, unsurprisingly, the first holder of this record.
Like, why would you want to get the Sock King socks? Well, you want to get the Sock King socks because he's a Guinness World Record holder.
And now you all know, if you want to try and beat the longest sock record, you have to make a sock that is at least 18 feet 9 inches long. Okay, so in the same blog post where Jessica tells people they can start spreading the news about Ravelry, she says that they prepared 500 buttons from a site called Button Arcade that has just the best early 2000s web design. After handing these buttons out at the festival, Maryland Sheep and Wool, which is the whole reason why we went on that whole cat, Bob, sock tangent anyway, they had nearly 6,000 people on the Ravelry waiting list. They also handed out buttons at Rhinebeck, another big yarn festival, in 2008. And in this vlog, there is another Bob mention. The people at Malabrigo, which is this big yarn company, sent over crocheted bobs to Jessica and Cassidy. At this Ravelry meetup, there were an estimated 600 to 700 people, which is like really big for an in-person event. I think it can be easy to see numbers on a screen and think that that will immediately translate into like in-person events, but most of the time it just doesn't. So it's really impressive that they had that many people there. So around the same time as all of these festivals are going on, a very popular knitting blogger at the time, Yarn Harlot, started talking about Ravelry. I looked through her blog and I couldn't find the post on her actual blog where she mentioned it, but there was a lot around the time, so I must have just missed it. But according to Jessica,
so if the Yarn Harlot talks about something, it like turns into like a phenomenon overnight.
Apparently around this time, at one point, they had 30,000 people on the waiting list. This little website idea that began on Jessica's blog a few years ago was blowing up and quickly taking all of Jessica and Cassidy's time to maintain. As I mentioned before, they had not gone into this with the intention of starting a business with scalability and capacity for thousands of people. So because of this, they had that invite-only system that I mentioned before, where they would slowly let people in off the waiting list. Cassidy mentions that they continued this slow trickle of accepting invites to make sure that people felt like the line was moving, but they really didn't have the capacity to have too much traffic on the website. So at this time, Cassidy was busy writing code and putting together the sites. Jessica was adding all of the patterns in by herself, by hand. She was typing them in from magazines that she received. I would assume that she got permission from the designers to do this, and or these were free patterns that she was just helping to translate onto another platform. This would obviously be great exposure for a designer at any level, getting your pattern onto a site with thousands of people who wanted to knit and buy your pattern. But yeah, I don't have any other specifics about exactly how that worked. The important thing is that she was adding in all of the patterns herself. But eventually, Ravelry added a feature that was inspired by the user-generated nature of Wikipedia, where users themselves could contribute to the database, which I think works much better. This comes up again and again, but so many aspects of this website were made possible due to crowdsourcing and community efforts. Around this time as well, they also had the help of librarians, like professional librarians, offering their expertise in how to organize the database. Additionally, as the community grew, Jessica and Cassidy realized that they needed to implement community guidelines to protect the space that they had created. They compare Ravelry to their living room and say that they did not want to tolerate any behavior that they would not tolerate in their own home. And this is something that will come up later as well. A lot of these guidelines were developed over time as things came up, and they were alerted by various volunteer moderators in forums.
So we had to kind of make more rules as time went on.
Over time, Jessica realized that the size of the database was making it increasingly more difficult to find patterns on the site. You could look up knit cardigan and then just be met with a wall of options with no way to narrow down the search. But at this point, in 2010, the site had over 100,000 patterns, 166,000 plus to be slightly more exact. They wanted to optimize the search engine, but there would be no way for them to do this with the small team that they had at the time. So naturally, they reached out to the community with a fun idea, a Ravelry search party. So Ravelry had prize donations from 17 different yarn brands with a retail value of over $5,000. The way the search party worked was as follows. For every pattern you reclassified, which was basically adding tags to describe what the pattern was, things like construction of the garment, techniques used, fit, size, etc., you would be entered into a raffle to win one of the 17 prizes. So let's take a look at some of the prizes. One of these prizes was 12 skeins of hand-dyed yarn from Sweet Georgia Yarns. I wanted to see what the monetary value of this prize was, and there was only one snapshot of their website in the Wayback Machine from 2010, and there was no yarn price information on there. But in 2011, a skein was going for 24 Canadian dollars, or according to the conversion rate from June 13th, 2011, which is the day that I found the price on the website, $24.58 US. Another prize was from Eat Sleep Knit that included a $200 gift card, t-shirt, pattern, 6 skeins of Malabrigo Silky Merino, a mug, and wool wash. This whole search party took about 10 days, and in the process, according to Cassidy, they tripled the amount of information in the search. So in this same interview on the Fruity Knitting podcast, Andrea asks the couple what Ravelry does to stay relevant these days, to keep up with the fast pace of the internet. Jessica and Cassidy said that they weren't interested in turning Ravelry into a site like Instagram or Facebook and streamlining the interface, but that they want to focus more on preserving and improving the features that the website already has. So I want to pause the timeline briefly to answer a few questions that you might have, and the outfit I'm wearing has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm about to talk about. I just wanted to wear something fun. So we're back at the board. We're going to answer a few questions that start with, how does Ravelry? So the first question is, how does Ravelry make money? That says make money. I'm so glad you asked. According to the interview on the Fruity Knitting podcast, Ravelry began with a dream and a personal credit card. The couple had no sort of external funding, and they had no plans to actually start a business. So they just put all of their business expenses on their own credit cards. For their first funding venture, they sold 1,000 t-shirts to cover some of the operating costs of starting up the site. And then the next funding venture was in the form of our very first Ravelry pun, a Ravel Razor. Their original goal for this Ravel Razor was $10,000, and one of their friends helped them set the fundraiser up. They eventually ended up raising $71,000 with the help of 3,457 Ravelry users. Jessica and Cassidy used this money to pay off their startup debt, buy an additional server, buy carbon offsets, and throw more fiber events. Users were very happy to contribute to the fundraiser because they felt that Ravelry was offering a service that was really useful to everyone. And then also, according to a 2012 blog post, which was unfortunately the most recent thing that I could really find of them talking about this, there are sort of 4 main ways that Ravelry funds themselves. I should have put 4 dollar signs here, but I don't think there's really space for another one. The first one was offering pay-per-click advertising to yarn and fiber companies. Cassidy said it was their goal to have a lot of smaller advertisers as opposed to several larger ones. Mary Heather, the Ravelry VP of Operations, approved all of these advertisements and makes sure they look nice. In 2012, they had 1,500 active advertisers, mostly comprising of Ravelry members who owned small businesses. About 50% of these users spent less than $15 on their advertising costs on the site. $15 per month. At this time, Ravelry also used to sell merch. They would work with Ravelry users who were designers and artists, and then work with other users who were screen printers and make and design merch. They worked with a small fulfillment company and warehouse that was based in Massachusetts, and I'm not really sure how much money they made off of this. They have a few items listed on the website right now, but they're all marked as sold out or out of stock. So I'm not sure how long they've been like that, or if they plan on ever releasing merch again, or if that's just kind of like a dead page on the website, but they did used to sell merch. Not sure how profitable it was. Another way they would make money was with something called extras. In 2012, Ravelry added this feature where people could upload images directly from their computer onto the knitting forums. I think otherwise they had to upload their pictures through Flickr first and then link it. This feature was called Ravelry Extra and cost $5 a year. Their goal was just to limit the number of people using this feature and to recoup some of the storage and bandwidth costs. This feature is still available on the site today. And the last and presumably the largest way they make money is by taking a cut of pattern sales. Their fee is considerably lower than some of the other pattern selling sites. They charge 3.5%, but only if you go above the threshold of $30 in a month. This is still their current system with the same threshold, and it seems to work pretty well for smaller designers. However, according to the inflation calculator on officialdata.org, $30 in 2007, when Ravelry launched, is equal to $44.42 in 2023. I don't know, maybe they'll eventually change the threshold for sales. This is a little bit of a nitpick, but just thought I would add that in. Anyway, basically the transaction fee is 3.5% for anyone making between $30 and $1,500. If you go above $1,500, it is a reduced fee. I don't know how much it is reduced by or what it is reduced to, but that is what they say. So then if you do make less than that $30 a month, you just have to pay the PayPal processing fee, which is 2.5% plus 50 cents per transaction. And just to put some numbers on all of this, a 2021 article from The New Yorker reveals that pattern sales on the site reached $28 million in 2020, and Ravelry took 2% of that amount, which is $560,000. Despite this fact, Jessica and Cassidy still refuse to call Ravelry an e-commerce platform, instead describing it as an online community for fiber enthusiasts. Rather than use an ad service like Google that would serve targeted ads based on demographic data, Ravelry selects ads exclusively for fiber-related products and events. The founders have no public relations or marketing firm, and customer support is still provided by employees. Cassidy has written nearly 30,000 public forum posts on Ravelry, most of them in response to users' concerns. In addition, 6 hyperactive Ravelry users serve as volunteer moderators, making sure that nothing on the main boards infringes on community guidelines. And as an offshoot of this Ravelry question, how do people make money on Ravelry? I didn't want to make new cards. You can put together the pieces of what that's supposed to mean. Or in other words, how profitable is the website for smaller designers? In 2019, Ravelry released a spreadsheet of pattern sales data for the 10,059 independent designers in January 2019 who sold at least one pattern on Ravelry. This spreadsheet included monthly sales in $50 increments and how many sellers were in each monthly sales tier. For example, there were 7,277 sellers in the 1 cent to $49.99 tier, the lowest, and 93 sellers in the $3,000 tier, which was the highest. So 72.3% of the sellers on Ravelry sold less than $50 of patterns in the month of January in 2019. The top 10% of sellers includes 964 designers, and any designer that makes more than $200 in a month qualifies for that top 10%. And the next question, how does Ravelry run? We're about to get a little technical, and I'm going to say some words that I don't fully know what they mean, but I've done my best here, and if anyone would like to explain any of these concepts more in the comments, feel free to do so. I am telling you right now, I read a lot of stuff, but I don't know if I understand it all. So this answer is from Cassidy in 2009 in that same interview with Tim Bray. She says, We own our servers and host in a data center where we rent space. That was the most cost-effective for us. The servers are for silicone mechanics, the bandwidth is from our data center hosted solutions, and Cogent, dirt cheap. We are using Amazon S3 for storage and taking advantage of CloudFront. We're currently storing about 5 terabytes with Amazon. Until we got a great deal with Cogent, Amazon made huge sense because the bandwidth was cheap compared to what we were paying. We have 7 servers running Gen 2 Linux and virtualized into a total of 13 virtual servers with Gen? Ravelry is managed by MySQL, Redis, Ruby, and Manticore Search. That's all I feel qualified to say about that. Again, feel free to interpolate in the comments. Another question you might be pondering at this point is how many employees it takes to run a site that now caters to 9 million knitters. I'm going to give you a moment to take a guess if you don't already as I change the board. Do you have your guess? It's 4. They have 4 employees, including Jessica and Cassidy, who are the founders. The employees are Jessica, who is listed as the founder and Mama Rav, Cassidy, who is listed as the founder and coder, Mary Heather, the VP of Operations and do-gooder, and Sarah, the community support specialist and hostess with the mostest. There used to be 5 members, but one of their team members passed away in 2021 from cancer. She was working as a part-time developer at the time, and after her death, they did not hire anyone to replace her. So now that we have briefly gotten to know Ravelry as a company, we are finally on to the first controversy. So before we get into the big controversy of today's video that had a bit of a wider reaching impact, I want to touch on 2 smaller controversies. The first is the bunker incident, and the second is the Olympics thing. So let's start with the Nazi bunker. So around 2009, Ravelry had 2 major groups of conservative knitters. So they had what the New Yorker referred to as the more center-right group, called Conservative Knitters, and then the hard-right group, called McCain Ravelry. After John McCain lost his presidential bid, the group apparently received a lot of hate and started making jokes about needing a safe space.
It's the bunker, which is always a fun thing to say. No, but...
Well, did you know that they said that that was a Nazi thing?
One of the comments that eventually led to the shutdown of the bunker, this alleged safe space, was that one member likened the burgundy scarf worn by Obama at the inauguration to a noose. Later that year, one of the group's users wrote a 5,000-word account of the saga on her blog Teapot Tantrums, which was titled Badge of Honor, Too Conservative for Ravelry. In the post, she invited the offending... So I won't read this whole post to you, but if you search the title, you can find it pretty easily. I'm just going to pull out some of the important sections and give you an overview of what really happened with the bunker. So she starts off by saying, "Yesterday I got up with the pups, did that, then went to check with my friends at the bunker. But first I logged onto Ravelry.com, which was commonplace. I check both places daily. But there was a problem when I went to log on at Ravelry. I was redirected to an error page that said simply, Error 403, forbidden. No warning, no nothing. I'm too conservative for Ravelry, but that's okay with me. I'll wear it as a badge of honor. I was getting more and more disillusioned with the cesspool anyway." So apparently Teapot said that they did not fit into the conservative knitters group, saying it had been made clear that I just didn't belong there. She then says, "I guess I wasn't the right brand of conservative for them. You see, I'm what I call a triple threat conservative. I'm a political, fiscal, and social conservative. Some people are uncomfortable with that, and I let them be. But they didn't let me be, and they didn't let Ellie Jane be, so she started up her new group and invited me over to play." So when McCain announced Sarah Palin as his chosen VP, the group was very excited, and at this point, it grew to over 600 members. Teapot says, "We also became a convenient target for trolls, those who naturally disagreed with us, but who felt the need to educate and enlighten us. We poor, unfortunate, knuckle-dragging, mouth-breathing McCain supporters, we were often painted with the broad brushes of fascism, Nazism, neoconism, bigotry/racism, classism, and just about any other ism you could name. At some point, Ellie Jane, who's the founder and moderator of the group, went on vacation and put Teapot in charge of moderating. And because Teapot Tantrums was on Pacific time and most of the other members seemed to be from other time zones, she mentions having a hard time keeping up with the trolls. At this point, Teapot makes sure to say that the group did not allow racism, sexism, or what most people with common sense would call hateful, But they were politically incorrect and allowed members to call Barack Obama a socialist, in a derogatory way, and to speculate on the birther conspiracies. As the election cycle came to a close, the McCain group began to attract more and more negative attention and trolls. The moderators of the group reached out to Cassidy and asked for help in hiding the vile and offensive pictures that showed up on some of the Ravatars. That's our next Ravelry-related pun. Basically, the Ravatars are just like the profile picture of a Ravelry user. So apparently they reached out, asked for help, and then Barack Hussein Obama was elected. And Teapot says, "Yep, we lamented, cried, sighed, complained, and shared with our members. The same people who couldn't get over it when Bush won 2 elections now screamed, cajoled, nagged, and berated us to get over it already and embrace Barack Obama. We wouldn't and continued to discuss amongst ourselves our fears, concerns, and suspicions and decided that the group shouldn't be renamed. Well, McCain lost, so the McCain Ravelry didn't fit anymore, now did it? We decided to hunker down and retreat to the safety of the bunker, similar to what the president would do when faced with danger. The McCain Ravelry was renamed The Bunker. And the trolls came out to play. At this point, people started commenting on how calling the group The Bunker was a Nazi reference. Teapot says, apparently these people didn't get out much or read much more than Mother Jones, The Nation, The Rolling Stone, or whatever communist rag is printed in their local towns. They simply didn't get the idea that a bunker is a place of safety. Ellie Jane, the founder of the McCain Ravelry group, also similarly said, small minds went immediately to the Hitler reference, which it wasn't. The presidential bunker is a command center that provides safety from outside forces, much like our group had become for conservatives on Ravelry who were under attack from Obama supporters all over the rest of Ravelry. That was the meaning behind the name, nothing more. Besides, Hitler's regime resembles Obama's thought process, not ours, so the irony is quite humorous. They speak for themselves here. Quick content warning for the next few minutes. I'm going to briefly reference lynching and SA. So if you'd rather not listen to that, then skip to this timestamp. But the TLDR of what I'm going to say is that people on Ravelry were saying kind of crazy things around this time. So then in the bunker group, there was this comment about a scarf and Obama that I kind of mentioned earlier. So I couldn't find the word for word of what this comment said, since it has been deleted from Ravelry, obviously. But the way people interpreted this comment was that the scarf that Obama wore at the inauguration should be called a noose, and that was a reference to anti-Black lynching. Apparently, according to the person who made the comment, that was not their intention. They said that the comment was not about the scarf that Obama was wearing. Obama was not mentioned or even alluded to at all. It was a reference to a thread in one of the Big Six entitled Inaugural Scarves on Inauguration Day. They say, when I saw that title, I mistakenly assumed it was about some sort of knit-along of scarves that people were going to do during the day-long inauguration television fest. That thread was, in fact, comments on some of the pretty scarves that were televised on people in the inauguration. Michelle Obama's mother was one, I think. I didn't open the thread until later to take a look. I didn't open any Big Six threads to read that day because we were all hunkering down, depressed in the bunker to console each other. I didn't watch the inauguration, so I haven't a clue as to what Obama or anyone wore, scarf or no scarf. They say, while talking in the bunker, I made the comment and even prefaced it with the clarification that it was humor, saying something like, on a humorous note, at the beginning. Then I said I unbelievably saw a thread titled in the Big Six that said inaugural scarves. My comment was that we call them nooses plural. The reference, which obviously was lost on some people, was that we were sick enough over his election to hang ourselves. How can plural nooses be constructed as a lynching threat on the president? The comment, which I now sorely regret, you have no idea, has been so twisted that I think our own bunker mates forget that it originally was no reference to Obama or anything he was wearing. I kept my eyes and ears off the inauguration that day, so I neither heard nor saw Obama. And not to comment too much on this, but I do think it's important to say that alleged good intentions do not a good person make. But also, I'm not really able to speculate on what this comment was construed as without being able to see the comment and its full context. I know it does seem like I'm highlighting a lot of conservative point of views in this story. But that's just because these were the people that were angry about it, and these were the people that were talking about it and putting out 5,000-word essays. This blog post also mentions that there was a forum called What Would You Do to Sarah Palin, in which members posted physical threats of violence, including but not limited to saying that she should be raped with a hockey stick. Other liberal groups allegedly also mentioned that President Bush and the VP should be shot, hung, or pushed over cliffs. As we see here, and will continue to see in the following years on Ravelry, they were very vocal about not tolerating hate speech or bigotry. From what I've read, it does appear that there was a double standard that did lean very heavily in favor of the left. If these comments that the articles reference were, as explicit as they mention, then I think a website that makes it a priority to not allow hate speech should probably have taken those comments down as well. This is one of those things where we're getting into really tricky waters, and I'm not an expert on these things, but because this is a very small company run by pretty much one or two people making the executive decisions at the top, these kinds of things were not decided by any sort of board or a balanced group of individuals in charge of and thinking about the business. A lot of these things were made in support of the founder's own personal political beliefs. And I think this also does get into the paradox of tolerance, where tolerating bigotry is tolerating intolerance. So there's certainly a line to be drawn somewhere. But I bring this all up to give you a sort of idea of the conversations that were happening around the time of this ban and another ban that we'll see later on. So after this comment about Obama and the scarf, the bunker was shut down. Alley Cat and Teapot Tantrums, as well as the other self-titled bunker babes, tried to form other groups, namely Dutch's Reading Room, where they could read some of the great quotes made by Ronald Dutch Reagan, Macho Sauce for fans of Alfonso Rochelle, The Noodle, and Galt's Gulch to discuss readings of Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. These groups were apparently infiltrated by trolls, and fairly soon after, members that had participated in the bunker were suspended and ultimately banned from Ravelry. This lengthy post ends with a good observation that Teapot's husband made. eHarmony.com was forced to accommodate gays and lesbians that wanted to use the matching service. Shouldn't a site like Ravelry.com try to remember the lessons learned there? Yes, it's a free site, which constitutes his sandbox, but if you're going to allow free speech, shouldn't all speech be acceptable, and not just that with which one agrees? And then she ends her post with a warning. Parents, take heed and protect your underage fiber enthusiasts from what they will see on this site without warning. And if you are interested in using Ravelry yourself, be aware that objectionable content can/may/will pop with no warning whatsoever. If you're easily offended, this site is not for you. If you don't mind naked/obscene yarn creations, foul language, celebration of just about everything under the sun, and I mean everything, then you're welcome to it. I won't be going back. There are plenty of other places to find crochet patterns and supplies, and I have plenty of bunker babe friends who either dye and spin yarn or who have friends that do. I'll be fine. Nice and ironically, after writing this post, she received some pushback from trolls, and then she made a follow-up post 5 days later with the stance that it's her blog and she shouldn't have to interact with trolls. So apparently this one woman was sending her emails and leaving a bunch of comments on Teapot's posts. So Teapot Tantrum says in her updated blog post, "The Constitution gives us the First Amendment, which does indeed give you to the right of free speech. However, that said, it does not give you the right to be heard or the right to be read. Additionally, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that by giving you the right to say what you want, it compels me to put up with a threatening or abusive tone, nor does it abrogate my freedom to determine with whom I choose to communicate or decline said communication. As the owner of this blog, it is my right to determine whether you will be given a place to air your views. If you'd like to take your issues to the nearest free speech plaza or hate-free zone, you are perfectly welcome to do that, and I would invite you to do so." To me, this kind of just sums up Ravelry's reason for shutting down the bunker, whether they were justified in doing that or not. Bunker babes had the right to free speech, but Ravelry did not choose to give them the right to be heard or read on their site. The blog then ends with Teapot linking 11 other blog posts about the bunker. Most of these links are dead at this point, or just really short posts of people saying, "I was suspended, free speech is dead," or something like that. And none of them are as extensive as Teapot's. But to wrap this story up, all of these bans only served to foreshadow the banning that is to come. Another controversy I found references to quite often in my reading was the Olympic thing. The year was 2012. The Olympics were in London. I was at the Olympics, not as an athlete, but as a child and a spectator. This is completely irrelevant, but I found these photos and had to share. And Ravelry was in the third year of something called the Ravelympics, which is our third Ravelry-related pun. The Ravelympics began in 2008, not to be confused with the Knitting Olympics, which take place every 4 years, just like any other Olympic sport, and will be orchestrated by the Yarn Harlot. The idea was for people to cast on or start their project at the Olympic opening ceremonies, like while they're watching it, and then work on that pattern or patterns for the 17 days while the Olympic flame is lit until it goes out. Here are some of the rules of the Ravelympics. The project must be a challenge for you to complete in 17 days. No casting on before opening ceremonies commence in Beijing. This is for the first Ravelympics. You must finish before the flame goes out. You may swatch before the games. I consider this training. Swatching is making a small square using the yarn and hook or needles that you plan on using, and you use that to calculate size and yardage and all sorts of things. So it's something you do to prep before you actually start the project. People who finish their projects on time will receive medals of glory, which I believe are tiny pins. The proceeds from the sales of these medals were then donated to the Special Olympics. So this is the Ravelympics. The first one was in 2008 during the Beijing Olympics. The second one was in 2010 during the Winter Games in Vancouver. And the third one was scheduled for 2012 during the London Olympic Games. However, on June 20th, 2012, Cassidy started a discussion thread on Ravelry called Notice from the United States Olympic Committee. In March 14th, 2011, my colleague Carol Gross corresponded with your attorney Craig Selmack in regard to a pin listed as the 2010 Ravelympics Badge of Glory. At the time, she explained that the use of Ravelympic infringed upon the USOC's, or the US Olympic Committee's, intellectual property rights, and you kindly removed the pin from the website. I was hoping to close our file on this matter, but upon further review of your website, I found more infringing content. Gotta put my glasses on for this one. Unlike the National Olympic Committees of many other countries, the USOC does not rely on federal funding to support all of its efforts. Therefore, in order to fulfill our responsibilities without the need for federal funding, Congress granted the USOC exclusive right to use and control the commercial use of the word Olympic and any simulation or combination thereof in the United States, as well as the Olympic symbol. The Act prohibits the unauthorized use of the Olympic symbol or the mark Olympic for any commercial purpose or for any competition. Thus, Ravelry.com's unauthorized use of the mark Olympic or derivations thereof, such as Ravelympics, may constitute trademark infringement, unfair competition, and dilution of our famous trademarks. The USOC would like to settle this matter on an amicable basis. However, we must request the following actions be taken. 1. Changing the name of the event the Ravelympics. The USOC is responsible for preserving the Olympic movement and its ideals within the United States. Part of that responsibility is to ensure that Olympic trademarks, imagery, and terminology are protected and given the appropriate respect. We believe using the name Ravelympics for a competition that involves an Afghan marathon, scarf hockey, and sweater triathlon, among others, tends to denigrate the true nature of the Olympic Games. In a sense, it is disrespectful to our country's finest athletes and fails to recognize or appreciate their hard work. The name Ravelympics is clearly derived from the terms Ravelry, the name of your website, and Olympics, making Ravelympics a simulation of the mark Olympic, tending to falsely suggest a connection to the Olympic movement. Their next request is removal of Olympic symbols in patterns, projects, etc. For your convenience, we have listed some of the patterns featuring Olympic trademarks. However, this list should be viewed as illustrative rather than exhaustive. And then they ask for a written reply to this letter no later than June 19th, 2012. Signed, Brett Hirsch, Law Clerk, Office of the General Counsel, United States Olympic Committee. So obviously the people on Ravelry were not super thrilled about this. Some of the responses to Cassidy's post. Here's one from Moo Boo Baby. Let me get this completely clear. They think that people might confuse the Ravelympics with the Olympics and get confused, and that if they did, that would somehow be insulting the athletes? Wow, just wow. In response to this letter as well, a lot of Ravelry users went to the US Olympic team's Facebook, Twitter pages, and emails and left very angry comments. After this backlash, Patrick Sandusky, the US Olympic Committee Chief Communications Officer, issued kind of an apology for the letter. He said, "Thanks to all of you who have posted, tweeted, emailed, and called regarding the letter sent to the organizers of the Ravelympics. Like you, we are extremely passionate about what we do. The letter sent to the organizers of the Ravelympics was a standard form cease and desist letter that explained why we need to protect our trademarks in legal terms. Rest assured, as an organization that has many passionate knitters, we never intended to make this a personal attack on the knitting community or to suggest that knitters are not supportive of Team USA. We apologize for any insult and appreciate your support. We embrace handcrafted American goods, as we currently have the Anin Flag Makers of New Jersey stitching a custom-made American flag to accompany our team to the Olympic Games in London. To show our support of the Ravelry community, we would welcome any handmade items that you would like to create to travel with and motivate our team at the 2012 Games. As a follow-up to our previous statement on this subject, we would like again to apologize to the members of the Ravelry community. While we stand by our obligation to protect the marks and terms associated with the Olympic and Paralympic movements in the United States, we sincerely regret the use of insensitive terms in relation to the actions of a group that was clearly not intending to denigrate or disrespect the Olympic movement. We hope you'll accept this apology and continue to support the Olympic Games. Many were still unsatisfied with this apology. Here is a comment included in an NPR article. Patrick Sandusky, your apology falls well short of any real acknowledgement of any wrongdoing on your part. Your clerk's language was insulting and inflammatory, and not any part of any cease and desist or form letter I have ever seen. To follow it up saying, while you're knitting, send us some of those things we didn't want you knitting in support of us in the first place, is just adding fuel to the fire. Do yourself a favor the next time you try to protect the Olympic brand and the interest of your sponsors. Do a little bit of research about the efforts you were trying to quash before sending threatening letters. If you had, you'd find out that you just stopped the US members of a massive group of people from watching NBC and all of the sponsors' ads because of your lack of judgment and your poor representation of the Olympic brand. Sincerely, Lisa. Despite this apology and all the back and forth and controversy, the US Olympic Committee proved too great a foe for Ravelry, and they have since renamed the event the Ravelenic Games, which is our fourth Ravelry-related pun. And at this point, all was well, until 2014, when the Olympic Games were held in Sochi, and there were discussions among the public of the anti-LGBTQ policies of the Russian government, and if people should be supporting the Games for that reason. This led to the organizers of the Ravelenic Games, which it wasn't Jessica and Cassidy, it was someone else, I'm not sure who. They posted a statement on this, of course. This statement said, "The Ravelenic Games is a worldwide group made up of thousands of diverse competitors who believe different things and hold different opinions. Diversity is wonderful, and we all appreciate it. However, it can also lead to disagreements, sometimes of the less than polite variety, and no one wants that. We're here for fun. In order to minimize disruptions, the decision was made at the beginning of the Games that politics, politicking, and political discussions would not be acceptable in this forum. Rainbows with messages, protests, pro and anti stances, these have their place. However, this forum is not that place. This rule is posted on the front page of the group and in the FAQs, and an overt announcement was made a couple weeks ago. We have had to edit a few posts to remove political messages. We don't want to do this. You don't want us to do this. Please help us out by not posting politics in the first place." And then they posted a second statement a couple hours later, following up and saying, "The no politics rule is intended to make the discussions here welcoming and warm for all comers. It applies only to the content of posts on the Ravelenics forum. This includes finish lines, event threads, team threads that are hosted here, and all other chatter. Team names, Ravatars, project names, project notes, and team threads hosted in the groups are not affected by this rule. Political messages are central to the identity of many teams, individual Ravthleets, and projects. Feel free to express those messages fully in those settings." Ravthleets. And that is the end of the beef of Ravelry and the US Olympic Committee. Okay, so now we are on to our final controversy of this video. This one necessitates the introduction of two new characters, Deplorable Knitter and Anne Pinkava. These two people host a podcast called Politically Incorrect Knitters, and they release new episodes every week since June 6th, 2020, and they currently have 164 videos. As far as I can tell, they only release these episodes on YouTube, not on any sort of other platform, and each episode is between 45 minutes and an hour and a half. So Deplorable Knitter posted her first knitting pattern in November of 2018 on Ravelry. In the first episode of the Politically Incorrect Knitters podcast called Who Are We and the Truth About Ravelry, she mentions that she had never intended to become a pattern designer, but that people had been asking for it after she posted pictures of her design. So for this first pattern, she just made one. As a politically incorrect knitter, she says she gets a lot of pushback from people because of the themes of her projects, which are generally pro-life, pro-USA, and pro-Trump. In the About section on her website, she says, "We support our president, our troops, and our God. If any of those things offend you, this is probably not the place for you." In regards to her name, she says, "For myself and a lot of other deplorables, it is a way to highlight the hypocrisy of the Democrats and their followers. We are living in a country where it is acceptable to call approximately half of the nation a basket of deplorables. And if you do not agree with them, you have an issue with white privilege or internalized masculinity. I call nonsense. I may be just one person. I may only be making knitting patterns, but I'm going to speak the truth." So that's something. In addition, based on a quick scroll through her Instagram, she is pro-police, pro-life, a self-proclaimed woman for Trump, pro-Second Amendment. She's anti-mask, anti-vaccine, making a post comparing mandatory vaccines to the Holocaust, and anti-drag queen, and anti-gay agenda. She also, unsurprisingly, has made a number of transphobic jokes / posts on her Instagram over the span of the past few years. Here's one, and here's another one. Honestly, non-binary is like, as far as transphobic jokes go, that's pretty funny. Like, I'll give her that one. And more on this later, but she is a staunch believer that the 2020 election was stolen and that the insurrection on January 6th was a peaceful protest. Let me just take a moment to remind you that once again, we can disagree with Deplorable, but let's not go to any of her social media and leave comments and give her feedback on that because that's engagement, clicks, money, all of that. So have your takes in these comments. Don't go to her pages. It's unnecessary, and more importantly, it's unproductive. She's not going to change her mind on any of this.
I won't change my mind because I don't have to, because I'm an American.
She's allowed to have her opinions, and we're allowed to not engage with them. So her co-host, Anne, is much less active on social media, but no less politically incorrect. She also has made her fair share of Donald Trump patterns. She knit a sweater with Donald Trump's silhouette on it, and when she finished the sweater, she posted a picture on Instagram and wished him a happy birthday. So, Deplorable was posting these patterns on Ravelry that were expressly political. She found this hole in the market and found an audience of people that were interested in these kinds of patterns. So she gained popularity because of that. The first of her controversial patterns was a Trump pattern, which people didn't like, and she received some pushback from it. The small amount of dissent kind of eventually subsided, and she went on her merry way until January of 2019, where she put up a Build the Wall hat. And people decided that she was racist and xenophobic because,
heaven forbid, we want to have laws in our country.
Shortly after posting this pattern, she received an email from Ravelry that said,
"We don't want a pattern that supports the president's racist wall." That was the quote.
She then continued releasing patterns for the next few months without too much event until June of 2019, where she made the mistake of releasing another beanie pattern. This one was gray with sort of a rainbow text that said, "God is love." And according to Deplorable in the podcast, she didn't realize that she released this during Pride Month.
I released it during Pride Month, which I actually didn't realize it was Pride Month because I don't mark that on my calendar. But that's okay. I mean, I don't have anything against it. I just didn't realize it.
In response, of course, people started calling her a homophobe, which, I don't know. I want to believe her. I want to believe that this was an accident and that she really did want to release the pattern as, you know, a reminder of God's promise and God's love. Because I'm sure if you live your life as a deplorable knitter, you're probably not thinking about Pride Month. In her pattern description, she does mention the true meaning of the rainbow, which is God's promise that he will never annihilate the earth again, which tracks. But we have to remember her Instagram posts, and I think the posts really fill in any of the cracks of where I might be willing to give her leeway. So just putting that out there. A lot of people like Deplorable, really like to distance themselves from these labels of homophobic or transphobic or racist. I do generally like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but in this case, you know, if the shoe fits, I don't know what else you would call these posts and these patterns. So the God is Love pattern was removed from Ravelry for being a homophobic dog whistle. She says that she didn't know at the time what a dog whistle was and had to Google it.
A homophobic dog whistle. I didn't know what a dog whistle was. I had to look it up.
For those at home who are not familiar with this term, although I'm sure most of you are, it's essentially political messaging using a term or phrase in coded language to avoid provoking the opposition. You may have heard this word a lot in reference to race, as Dr. Ian Haney Lopez refers to dog whistles in this context as political catchphrases that don't explicitly mention race, but are ultimately used to refer to people of color and the various threats that they apparently command. So anyway, after telling us about the God is Love hat, she says a really crazy sentence in the podcast.
So after I was a homophobe and a xenophobe and a racist,
Yes.
June 18th, the president announced his campaign to run again.
Oh, yeah.
So on that day, I released a cowl. It said, Trump 2020, keep America great.
There are so many sarcastic little quips that they do back and forth in this segment. So if I were a much more malicious person than I am, I would clip some of these out of context.
A+ designing.
And make them look worse.
I'm really super glad that I was educated.
I understand sarcasm, and I understand that they're saying things that they maybe don't mean.
Wow, that's
Because-
right.
You know, they're clearly being willfully ignorant, and that's the kind of people that we're dealing with here. So after posting the Trump pattern, Deplorable started receiving a lot of community reports. Apparently this was something that was happening to her after every pattern release, and Ravelry was telling her that she had to be in charge of moderating the comments and the feedback and deleting anything that was sort of hateful or not in direct reference to the pattern. So the report function was a part of the site as a way for users to add their own notes or potential corrections into a pattern. So for example, if you were working on a pattern and you noticed that there was like an incorrect stitch count or number of rows somewhere, then you could leave this like sticky note feedback so that anyone else could see it. And if the designer didn't have a chance to change the pattern before someone else bought it or made it, they would see that correction added. In the case of Deplorable though, here are some of the sticky notes that were left on her Trump pattern. All of these sticky notes were public. They sort of served as comments and feedback. And when you posted a sticky note, people could see the name of the person who posted it. Apparently someone who left a sticky note on this Trump pattern was then doxxed. I guess their address was in another forum somewhere, and someone found it and then posted it again in regards to this sticky note thing. Deplorable claims that she didn't know anything about this and feels really bad about this happening. There were some rumors going around that her husband was the one that doxed the person, but she denies this and says that her husband is not nearly tech savvy enough to be able to navigate Ravelry, dox someone, and then go about it like unidentified, I guess. So I don't know who doxed that person. He does seem to feel bad about that, but either way, that's a really serious thing to happen and should not happen in response to this political back and forth. So emotions were high, and we don't really know what happened, but this is a serious thing. After this, not just because of the doxing, because of a lot of the back and forth and the sticky notes, Deplorable was kicked off of the site on June 21st, 2019. And on June 23rd, Ravelry posted a big update called Policy: Do not post in support of Trump or his administration. They say, we are banning support of Donald Trump and his administration on Ravelry. This includes support in the form of forum posts, projects, patterns, profiles, and other content. Note that we will not destroy project notebook data. If a project needs to be removed from the site, we will make sure that you have access to your data. Even if you are permanently banned from Ravelry, you will still be able to access any patterns that you purchased. Also, we will make sure you receive a copy of your data. We cannot provide a space that is inclusive of all and also allow support for open white supremacy. Support of the Trump administration is undeniably support for white supremacy. The community guidelines have been updated with the following language. Note that support of President Trump, his administration, or individual policies that harm marginalized groups all constitute hate speech. Then there are some policy notes. You can still participate if you do in fact support the administration, you just can't talk about it here. We are not endorsing the Democrats nor banning Republicans. We are definitely not banning conservative politics. Hate groups and intolerance are different from other types of political positions. We are not banning people for past support. Do not try to weaponize this policy by entrapping people who do support the Trump administration into voicing their support. Similarly, antagonizing conservative members for their unstated positions is not acceptable. You can help keep Ravelry safe by flagging any of the following items if they constitute support for Trump or his administration: projects, patterns, forum posts, and profiles. So following this announcement, they also posted a tweet with very similar language saying that we can't provide a space that's inclusive to everybody if we are also offering a place for people to discuss Trump and support him. Ravelry said this ban was based on a similar ban that RPGNet made in 2018 banning discussions of Trump. They later published an update after Trump had left office, saying that the ban remained in perpetuity. Ravelry stated that this ban was not intended to isolate conservative crafters themselves, just Trump-related discussions, projects, and forums. After this statement and its corresponding tweet were released, there is what I can only describe as an uproar from all sides of the political spectrum. So let's take a look at some of the responses. First of all, let's look at Deplorable. What does she have to say about being kicked off of Ravelry? She posted on her blog with a great post titled, "Ravelry says I'm a white supremacist." In this post, she says, "Okay, obviously I'm not actually a white supremacist, but on Sunday, an entire community of knitters and crocheters were labeled as such by Ravelry. For those of us who have been accused, this is particularly upsetting. It is sad and discouraging that by trying to show our love for our country and support of President Trump, we have been labeled as such. I'm not that old, but I remember when people didn't have to agree with others to get along. We were able to civilly discuss issues and have respect for each other. Not the case anymore. There are some people who will just scream at you until you sit down and fall into line or you go away. Ravelry did the same thing to conservatives 10 years ago. When it happened, there wasn't as much attention as there is now. Hopefully this time around, people will see how crazy their policy is. I know the story has been circulated by blogs and news sites the world over. The mainstream media is applauding this outlandish turn of events. Other sources are looking at it as the absolutely unbelievable silencing of conservatives that it truly is. I have been getting lots of questions about why I left the platform. If it is not obvious by now, I did not leave, I was removed. My patterns make people uncomfortable. That's why they continually tried to label me as a racist and homophobe. Several attempts to contact the site have gone unanswered. I can guess why. The whole Ravelry situation came to my attention about 5 minutes before I walked into church on Sunday. I couldn't believe what I had heard, but I turned off my phone and went into the service. Ironically, not really, we know that God works in awesome ways. The sermon was about how the devil works. Pastor was saying that the devil is doing his best work by making people believe he does not exist. He was emphasizing the Bible says over and over, do not be deceived. If there is no God or devil, are there really consequences for our choices? Then she inserts a Bible verse, which I will skip over. But if you're interested, it's 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11. And then in all caps, she says, I do not hate people based on their choices. It says you can be washed by the Spirit and justified. Satan is deceiving people that they will find fulfillment in these actions, which is why a group can label half of the population as white supremacists and their followers believe it is true. People don't want to look in the mirror and see their faults. It is easier to blame those around them. For the people who do not want to leave Ravelry, I understand the feeling, but how can you support someone that believes this of you? There are other pattern resources available. There are many free blogs on the internet. You may have to do a bit more digging to find what you would like, but isn't it worth the extra work to make sure your money and ad clicks aren't going to a group that literally thinks you're a bigot? There is not only a political battle happening in our country, but also a spiritual one. Another blog post from a couple days later. All week long, I've been embroiled in the fallout of the decision of a certain site last week. So many people are upset. There are people that never talked politics who no longer feel welcomed. There are people from the left who are no longer on the site because they feel everyone should have a chance to their opinions. It is really a sad situation and is probably going to get worse the closer to it gets to the election. I was really sad by the turn of events, but as I looked around, it is a much larger issue. This week in the news, there were stories about YouTube and Google censoring people. The largest pro-Trump thread on Reddit was censored. Twitter is going to cover world leaders' tweets if they determine they could be harmful. Seriously, what is happening to the world? When did we become so hypersensitive that if someone disagrees with us, we are going to shut down their opinion? I think we need to keep speaking up. Sometimes it is uncomfortable. Maybe you don't want to rock the boat, become a target, or be ostracized. The media and others are trying to take away our voice so that it seems like there are no more conservatives. Don't let them silence us. Last night, I released a new pattern, and then she released this pattern. She made an Instagram post about this as well. Story time, I was in the McDonald's drive-thru right after the Ravelry ban when I saw this pattern in my head. I came home, charted it, and knit it within 24 hours. It is one of my best sellers. Thanks, Ravelry. And then here are a few other responses from the community. A lot of these came in the form of tweets or posts on Ravelry or posts on Instagram. This is from Deborah. I support our president and the Trump administration, and I am not a white supremacist, nor do I support white supremacy. I am a conservative. How dare you call me a supremacist? I have used Ravelry for years, but never again. I am closing my account immediately. Next, a tweet from Pamela Poppins. This is equal to bakers who won't bake a cake for a same-sex marriage. Politicizing Ravelry leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Amy Singer from Nitty Mag tweeted saying, I just responded to someone claiming to be representing a large group of conservative knitters and crocheters asking if Nitty, her magazine, supports Ravelry's decision. The answer is still yes. Nitty is about inclusion, and in my opinion, this policy is about inclusiveness. Another person tweets, "My favorite thing is all the non-knitters asking knitters if we've heard of this great Ravelry site that's banning Trump support. I cannot overstate how widely used and loved Ravelry is in the community. It's like asking if you've heard of Twitter." Madman Knitting, Gregory Patrick, made this lovely graphic. In a blog post they write called "Why I Deleted My Ravelry Account." It's very graphic design is my passion. So in this post, Patrick says, "These skeins, these needles, these movements of beauty that shift from knit to purl and back again to build something beautiful may be the only thing in this divisive time that some of us have in common. But at least with all our differences, we have at least that we can build from, that we can use to communicate to each other with, learn from each other. Through knitting, we should be hoping to build alliances with our alleged enemies through the majesty of our shared craft. Not all of us got to knitting from the same place, but we're all here now. And we should be more anxious than ever to hear from someone so different from us through the language we share of our needles clicking and clacking together to create something of comfort. I so wish Ravelry had a change in their policies that said, everyone come to the table, bring your projects, and let's talk. But instead they insisted that some of you aren't welcome here at all. And I really don't want to be part of that attempt to continue to divide people on every level possible. I mean, really. This division between us is growing at a rapid rate, and instead of helping to rein it in, pull it back, and find a way to get us back to the table, Ravelry decided that keeping us separate worked better for them as a company. And I just don't believe their company policies have anything to do with knitting anymore. For years now, I have used this blog to foster knitting as a method of contemplation, of meditation, and for myself, prayer. I have always thought that in its purest form, knitting allows time for personal reflection, allowing us to turn to the quiet part of our soul and listen without all of the maddening noise that we're constantly barraged with. And God knows we need that now more than ever. It never occurred to me that a knitting group, the largest on the planet, I think they have 8 million members, would ever opt to say that only some people are allowed there. In this post, he also says, "Being a gay man who knits in this community is nothing novel. I'm received with open arms. Being a conservative gay man who knits in this community is forbidden." He also responded to Vox via email with a comment. He told them that he had been a Ravelry user for 10 years before finally deleting his account after this policy update. He says, "The language and tone of their statement was designed to start a fight. Rather than allowing this community to find ways to heal, they decided that the conversations required to get to a better place would be banned." He also said, "My political philosophies are based on my own life experiences and not based on my gender, race, or sexual orientation. Ravelry was overlooking the power of knitting to bring people together across political divides. We as knitters are fortunate enough to have that one peaceful craft to begin a simple conversation with. We start with, 'Where did you get that gorgeous yarn?' or 'What are you making?' to something deeper over time. And yes, things can get heated when we discover how passionate we are about our opposing beliefs, and that is wonderful." This article from Vox also points out that the broader knitting community had been starting to have conversations about race and inclusivity. In February of 2019, there was a lot of discussion and media attention around 2 knitting influencers. There's more to talk about here and lots more to get into. I'll save that for another day, either part 2 or its own separate video. Jordana Nickel at Georgetown University conducted a linguistics study for a master's thesis analyzing a few independent dyers' responses to this ban on Instagram. So independent dyers are just like a small dyeing company, think MCY, that doesn't have like a big corporation over them. And in their paper, Nickel looked at these dyers' use of intextualization, which Nickel defines as the placement of source text within a new context to reference the verbiage of the Ravelry ban. The study looked at 2 questions primarily. How do the members of a non-political community position themselves when addressing political concerns? And how do yarn dyers use intextualization to respond to and reframe a political ban? After the ban, a lot of small business owners felt like they needed to say something to let people know what side they were on and what they thought about things because of something called civic consumerism, which is basically the idea that people want to support businesses, especially small businesses, that best align with their own values. These yarn dyers knew that whatever they posted would directly affect their sales, whether that was positively or negatively. This study specifically looked at 4 public Instagram posts of independent yarn dyers, 2 that were pro-Ravelry ban, 1 that was anti, and 1 that was neutral. And the study concluded that the dyers used this intextualization to integrate the text of the Ravelry ban into their own posts, in order to frame the political discourse within a moral framework instead. The goal of the post was to assert themselves as morally minded people moderate their own spaces, and de-emphasize the importance of someone unfollowing them. For example, one of the pro-Ravelry posts by Small Needle Studio positions herself in agreement with the ban by saying that she would support the ban even if she did not agree with them politically, because she saw this as an issue of creating safe spaces for BIPOC and queer communities. In contrast, an anti-Ravelry ban by Ancient Threads Fiber mentions God summoning this higher power into the conversation. They say that they do not support Ravelry's decision because of their poorly worded policy, divisively broad assumptions, partisan censorship, and discrimination that does not align with my values. The text on their photo says, "Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil." Some knitters were hopeful that this ban would sort of trickle up and bleed into other areas of the knitting community and the community at large, but others were not so hopeful. So what is Deplorable up to these days after the ban? She's been busy. Like I said, she's still releasing podcast episodes with Anne, and they have created this big community of like-minded crafters around them. She's still posting on Instagram with gems like this. First, they came for the bunker, but I did not speak out because I was not a member of the bunker. I'm not going to read the rest, but it follows the structure of the Holocaust poem. In her caption, she says, "Isn't it funny how after Ravelry has gotten rid of all the wrong thinkers, they had to find new people to fight with? I have news for all the Lady Di Yarns customers. You aren't the first group to be deraveled. You aren't even in the top 3. This is their MO. Sorry it happened, but this isn't a new story. It's been going on for as long as Ravelry has been in business. So the white supremacists that were banned in 2019 will let you sit with us if you want." Lady Di Yarns, that's another story. We'll get to that. Not today, though. And yeah, if you're not familiar, this poem was originally a Holocaust poem, which makes me really uncomfortable to see regurgitated in this context by someone who has been accused many times, not by me, but by a lot of people, for being a white supremacist. So that's one thing she's doing. Also, notably, she knit 36 Stop the Steal hats. I believe that at least a few of them were at the event at the Capitol, based on some of the comments on her Instagram. I spent hours looking for a photo of one of these at any of the events. I couldn't find anything. I did post on my Instagram story and TikTok and asked people to look as well, and some people spent a really long time going through a lot of different photo galleries and sources and videos, and nobody found anything, so I don't think there's any pictures of the Stop the Steal hats that Deplorable knit at the insurrection, but I'm pretty sure it was there. So if you do find something, feel free to send it to me. I just think it would be interesting, but based on all of the things that we know, I'm pretty sure it was there, and the fact that she knit that many anyway is also interesting. It probably wouldn't surprise you to find out that Deplorable thinks that this was a peaceful protest incited by Antifa, and that somehow Antifa was the cause of the non-peaceful part of the protest. So yeah, I don't know where we draw the line on these things. At the time of the Trump ban on Ravelry, it probably seemed like an overreaction, and maybe it was to everything they knew up to that point. But given how much things have escalated, the ban seems less out of left field and much more in line with things happening on other sites like Twitter in order to protect their space. One of the most interesting things about this ban was that both Trump-supporting knitters and non-Trump-supporting knitters alike felt that this ban was an overreach of what Ravelry should have the right to do. They felt like this private company shouldn't have these kinds of rights to censor different political conversations. As I've mentioned in previous videos, knitting and crafting in general has a big history of being used for political movements. I touched on this briefly in my Hey Hey crochet video on my other channel, but craftivism and using crafts for political purposes has always been around, and in a polarized political climate, it's not surprising that craftivism results in controversy from both sides. Ravelry has been the center of political conversation before. Ravelry was a large reason for the pervasive nature of the Pussy Hat Project in 2017. The platform allowed for a widespread community of crafters to get together, organize, and create these hats. The ban also inevitably led to many calling for keeping politics out of knitting. What's missing from a lot of the responses that I can find, at least the ones like in articles and discussed, I don't know, maybe these are somewhere on forum boards that have now been deleted, but it's the fact that people who are begging for politics to be kept out of knitting are not acknowledging their privilege in being able to pick and choose what is considered political and what's not. It's one thing to want to create and protect your own online spaces that you enter for enjoyment and relaxation. I think we all want that. But on the other hand, what some people call politics or debate are just fundamental parts of other people's identities. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but I think it's important for people to have a space to express themselves through fiber arts. I don't know how much power we should give to online platforms to be able to make this decision for us of what should and shouldn't be shared, but I also know there's a difference between being tolerant to free speech and allowing someone to take up space in a way that is intolerant to others. I don't think there's a cut and dry answer to how Ravelry should have responded here, but I do applaud them for making a choice and sticking to it despite the large pushback. Okay. Against all odds, it seems, we have made it to the end of the video, the end of part 1 of Ravelry's controversies. We're gonna leave the story here for now, and we'll come back next time to touch on the things that have happened since the Trump ban. But as promised, I hope you were paying attention because it is now time for a short quiz. I'll put the points up on screen so you can see how many points you get for each correct answer. For this quiz, there is no prize but glory. Question number 1. In what US state was Ravelry founded? The answer is Massachusetts. Question number 2. In what US state was the Guinness World Record longest hand-knit sock knit? And the answer for that question is also Massachusetts. Question 3. How long is the longest sock? The answer is 18 feet 8 inches. Number 4. How many employees does Ravelry have? 4. That's right, only 4 employees. Number 5, this one's a little trickier. List 3 of the 5 Ravelry-related puns that appeared in this video. If you can list any more, then you get bonus points. So pause and think about them, write them down, whatever. The answer is Ravelraiser, Ravatar, Ravelympics, Ravelenic Games, and Ravfleets. Number 6, what is the name of Ravelry's mascot? The answer is Bob, the dog. Bob arrives. Bob in the longest sock. How could we forget? Question number 7, what year and in what city were the Olympics scheduled to be held when the US Olympic Committee sent the cease and desist to Ravelry? The answer is London 2012. Number 8. Which deplorable knitter pattern was the one that most directly led to the Trump ban in 2019? The answer to this one is the Trump 2020 cowl. Number 9. On what date did Jessica first post on her blog about the idea for Ravelry? You get 1 point if you remember the year, and a bonus point if you get the month and day as well. So the answer for this one is April 12th, 2005. And finally, name one of the 4 offshoot groups created by the Bunker Babes as a result of the banning of the Bunker Group. The answer to this one is Dutch's Reading Room, Macho Sauce, The Noodle, and Galt's Gulch. Let me know how you did on the quiz in the comments. It might be fun to have this be more of like an interactive thing where I actually like write out the quiz and have a Google form and see if people can, see if there's a way to figure out how to track your progress on the quiz. But for now, let me know how many of those questions you got right. I intentionally put some really hard ones in there that I probably wouldn't have even remembered from just watching the video once. So that's kind of all I have for you. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you want to be notified when part 2 comes out, make sure you subscribe. You can turn on notifications for my channel. Have a good rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed learning about all of this fun, crazy stuff, and I will see you next time.